Yesterday, I introduced legislation that I believe is a pretty significant reform to one of those regulations, considered to be a major impediment to continued progress in New York State, the Scaffold Law. New York remains the only state in the nation that imposes a legal standard of absolute liability on business owners, developers, and contractors in every single instance of a gravity-based injury in the workplace. That means full liability regardless of fault. This reform legislation would change that. It would replace the absolute liability with a more reasonable, responsible standard of comparative negligence.
Well, we need to reform the scaffold law. In fact, the day of doing that is long overdue. It unnecessarily drives up costs on the construction of anything, public or private, in New York State. Our infrastructure, our building infrastructure, highway and road infrastructure, environmental infrastructure, or for private residents, citizens, or private businesses, local governments, school districts, whoever's building is paying more in New York than they'd be paying elsewhere because we have a law that no other state in the union has that is holding people accountable for injuries for which they may not be responsible.
The scaffold law really is indicative of everything that is wrong with the state of New York in terms of having the second highest cost of doing business in the country, one of the poorest economic outlook. Scaffold drives up the cost of liability insurance, which then in turn drives up the cost of construction, drives up the cost of owning, operating your business, has tremendous impact, adverse impact on taxpayers. So what this will do, this sensible really reform, will decrease the cost of doing business, decrease the cost of construction, particularly with liability insurance. It's going to help create more jobs. It's going to help people retain jobs. It's going to increase the salaries of their jobs. So this really has a whole host of positive benefits for New Yorkers, for the taxpayers, consumers, and those that are really looking for work.
Manufacturers with businesses in multiple states know that no other state in the union has an open-ended liability law for falls from heights like New York State does under 240, 241 of the labor law. Yeah, the business community knows this. It's reflected in the cost of liability insurance. It is. It's one of many additional costs that New York State imposes on its economy.